he immersed himself in Aristotelian studies, and he said, look, there's no need for an opera. If one is to take the path of reason, of philosophy, or one is to take the path of faith, both paths led unerringly and undeniably to the fact that there is a God. Now this is very important. It's very important because it was a theme that was not going to leave and hasn't left us yet. You know, many people say to me, Suresh, you're a scientist, does that mean you're irreligious? And I have discomfort answering that question because I'm actually irreligious but not godless. So we'll talk about that later. Okay, so this is the Middle Ages. Aquinas, we're talking about early 12th century. These guys usher in, them and others. So the house that Christianity built began to be assaulted by this time. These were not the only ones that were assaulting it. They were the Cathari, they were the Albanesians, they were the Waldenesians, they were even the Dominicans, they were the Franciscans, the Lutherans. The world of Christianity began to splinter. And capitalism inserted its dirty little fingers into the mess. So what started to happen is that wealth began to drive change. The nobles found that the church and of course the wrath of people like Innocent didn't help. I mean, you just had to look at the guy cross-eyed and he'd throw you to the inquisitors. And they were a nasty bunch of folks. So the excesses of the church didn't help. But what the nobles began to do is they began to free their serfs. The serfs became peasants. The peasants were allowed to own land, or at least rent land from their former masters. And commerce began to establish itself. What this did is it ushered in a period of affluence, of disposable income. And what happens when people have disposable income and affluence? They begin to challenge the norms that are there. They begin to look for other ways of enjoying themselves. And this created, in the 12th and 13th centuries, what we came to know as the Renaissance. It started with a very, very wealthy Italian family in Florence, the Medici. And if you go to Florence today, although there was a terrible fire in the 12th century, you can still see some of the remarkable works of art that the Medicis created. The Medicis, of course, were the patrons of no less than Leonardo da Vinci, the man who is claimed as the Renaissance man of our world. And, thank you for putting that picture up, they also commissioned the painting of the Cathedral of the Sistine Chapel, the famous Michelangelo picture that Vijay Datadin showed in his presentation. So, this period of affluence, of art, of culture, of music, of self-indulgence, of beginning to look at nature not as a thing to be controlled or whispered about, but to be enjoyed, ushered in this century. And that brings us to the next set of people that I've selected. So we can... These guys. So these guys, we're talking about 1450s to about the 1750s. Remember that. What has the world done? It had this pervasive idea that the world is only explained by Aristotelian physics. It had this uneasy existence that church and the pagan science had this unholy mixture somewhere, but let's enjoy ourselves and enjoy literature and art. There was no real satisfying explanation of why we exist the way we do. Until Nicholas Copernicus, who was a Polish guy. This guy was quite remarkable. You know, today we say, I'm a physicist and I'm a bright guy. Well, Copernicus was a physicist, a mathematician, a physician, and a lawyer. Right? This guy was a serious overachiever. And to boot, he was Polish. Anyway, Copernicus was a remarkable fellow, clearly. And he challenged directly the Aristotelian notion that the world revolved around the earth. And was bold enough to say, I am going to propose a heliocentric notion that the world revolves around the sun. Now this was heresy. And Copernicus was nobody's fool. He clearly knew that if he published his ideas, he was going to get burned at the stake. So he ordered that his memoirs, which was a revolutionary movement of the heavenly bodies, be published the day he died. Right? So the De Revolutionibus Orbium was published the day Nicholas Copernicus died. And it caused a massive uproar. Shortly after it was published, there was a guy called Tycho Brahe. Remember Tycho Brahe? He was a favorite guy of all scientists. Tycho Brahe was Danish, and he was really quite a lovely man, apparently. Tycho Brahe observed the first supernovae activity of the time. Remember, the ancient world, we all looked up to the heavens, as we still do, for meaning, right? Oh God, why you have to listen to this, right? Anyway, Tycho Brahe saw a supernova event happening, which convinced him that Copernicus was right. So he wrote to his friend, and this is why I think your presentation was so appropriate, Vijaya. You see, back then we're talking about Europe, and men and women wrote to each other by letters. It was the time of letters. It was a lovely time when people regarded language as being important. Now, because of a series of major events, including the Cold War, we lost that collaborative spirit in the world, and the World Wide Web is one of those ways, of course, in which we can regain it. But that's for later. Tycho Brahe wrote Johannes Kepler in Holland and said, Kepler, this is a remarkable thing. I believe that Copernicus is right. And of course, Kepler was the one who wrote down the first 3 laws